Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff on the Newshour tonight. Mixed rulings in a blow to end surging COVID infections. Officials scramble to flatten new curves as the debate on when to reopen schools heats up. Plus, defying the odds, a Maryland nursing home with zero COVID-19 infections and the early steps that kept residents alive.
When I heard the president say we only had 15 cases and he thought that by the end of the week it would be zero, I knew that it was time that we take action.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
When the world gets complicated, a lot goes through your mind. With Fidelity Wealth Management, a dedicated advisor can tailor advice and recommendations to your life. That's Fidelity Wealth Management.
Consumer Cellular. Johnson & Johnson. Financial services firm Raymond James. The Candida Fund, committed to advancing restorative justice and meaningful work through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. More at candidafund.org. Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and the advancement of international peace and security at carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
There are two. The Supreme Court has spoken. What consequences will these rulings have on the powers of the president and those who seek to investigate him? We get two perspectives tonight. Mary McCord is a former prosecutor who became the 550,000 worldwide today, including 133,000 here in the United States. And the number of new infections shows no signs of abating. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor reports.
Day by day, the new surge in COVID-19 cases is growing. Much of the country is now steadily reporting increased infections. And today, there were new single-day highs in Alabama and Montana and other parts of the country. Only two states, Vermont and New Hampshire, are seeing infections decline, according to the New York Times. Governors are scrambling to try to flatten the new curve after their states reopened.
If you're in those vulnerable age groups or you have the comorbidities, be very careful about the types of close contact you have. Avoid crowds at all costs, because those are going to be the situations where you're going to be most at risk.
Today, the nation's top infectious diseases doctor advised states to pause lifting restrictions. Dr. Anthony Fauci spoke on an online forum in Washington.
So rather than think in terms of reverting back down to a complete shutdown, I would think we need to get the states pausing in their opening process, looking at what did not work well, and try to mitigate that.
Meanwhile, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention insisted his agency is not revising its guidelines for schools to reopen.
It's not a revision of the guidelines. It's just to provide additional information to help the schools be able to use the guidance that we put forward.
Robert Redfield spoke a day after President Trump called the CDC's standards impractical. Yesterday, Vice President Pence said new guidelines would be coming out next week as a result of the president's criticism. At the Capitol, debate also heated up over reopening schools. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi warned against putting children at risk.
This administration seems to be turning its back on science and instead saying, open up, take a risk. Oh, by the way, open up the schools. Overwhelmingly, the teachers want to open up the schools, but it has to be safe for the children.
But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy argued that remote learning will hurt a generation of students and he urged incentives for schools to resume.
You can protect them from liability, so schools will actually have a willingness and a desire to open, and not a fear that they're going to be sued.
The pandemic's economic damage keeps mounting as well. The Labor Department said today more than 1.3 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week. The world's other hotspots are also struggling to make headway. Today, India reported 25,000 new cases in 24 hours. In hard-hit Mumbai, doctors went door to door to test residents for the virus. And the government of Serbia dropped plans for a weekend lockdown after
In the day's other news, President Trump's